Kijiko, spoon.
And what is it in Gujarati?
Chamchi. Chamchi or chamchi, yeah.
So we say kijiko, and that is Swahili?
Yes.
Okay, so what other words did you say? There was...
Sani, thali, eating plate, dinner plate.
So thali is
Gujarati. Sani is Swahili,
Okay.
and plate is English.
Sweet corn.
Sweet corn is maka in Gujarati,
So pangusa is
like mopping.
that in Swahili?
Yes.
So what do you say for that in Gujarati?
પોચા કરવા છે અથવા પોતું કરવું છે.
Swahili words mixed in with the Indian language Gujarati, a fusion and blend that tells a history that crosses continents and centuries. I'm Rupal Rajani, and in my series Exiled, I've been looking at stories of Ugandan Asians like me, forced to flee the country they had made home when they were kicked out by dictator Idi Amin in 1972. This time, I'm taking a look at things through language.
First is Swahili, and English. History, yeah.
History sounds like it should be Swahili.
Yeah! Swahili, known as a lingua franca, a language used for communication between groups of people who speak different languages. It's spoken by over 2 million people in Eastern and Central Africa, used widely in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and around 40% of its vocabulary is directly from Arabic, which was initially spread by Arab traders along East Africa's coast. It was then formalised under the German and British colonial regimes in the region in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a language of administration and education. But it's not the only language spoken in Uganda, which is where I was born, as Dr. Aisha Belkadi from the Department of Linguistics at the University of London explains.
There are 41 languages spoken in Uganda, so 41 indigenous languages spoken there. And yes, different ethnic groups speak different languages. So Luganda is spoken by the majority group, I think in terms of number, but it's not even the official language. English is the official language. And Swahili is spoken by people, but it's not by the majority of people.
Even though it's not the most common language spoken in Uganda, it's the one I've heard most about over the years. I mean, who knew when I was growing up that a lot of the words I was using weren't Gujarati, which is my mother tongue, but words that my family had adopted from Swahili when we were living there. I remember talking to my best friend, Jamie, about this. She remembers getting all confused about the word banana. You must remember she was fairly young when she came to the UK with her parents, and at age 5, going to school proved a little challenging at times.
I only know bananas, or at the time only knew bananas as dizzy. So I'm like arguing that it's called a dizzy, and this child is going to be, no, it's a banana. I'm like, and I start crying, no, it's a dizzy, it's a dizzy. And then kind of went to the teacher for moral support, and the teacher turned around and went, I'm really sorry, darling, but it is called a banana. And I was mortified because it was like, why don't they understand it's called a dizzy? And then kind of realising from mum and dad that dizzy was a Swahili word. It was probably about 10 or 15 years ago that I actually realised how much of my vocabulary is actually Swahili. I remember an incident with my grandma. Grandma had come to stay with us from India, and she asked for, I can never say in Gujarati, I think it's rakabi. Rakabi. And I just looked at her and went, what? And I remember like pacing up and down the kitchen. Dad sees me and he goes, what are you doing? And I went, she's asking for something called a rakabi. And Dad just laughed at me and he goes, Jaisani. And I went, well, why doesn't she just say Jaisani then, isn't it? I was a saucer. Yeah, then kind of realising that it's Jaisani isn't a Gujarati word. So, yeah, it's been a bit weird, a bit surreal, isn't it? You realise there's so many words that you're using and not even Gujarati.
And just like Jamie, for years, I didn't understand why there was this confusion. Language is always changing and can at times hinder communication, as you've just heard. But what does it say about where I come from?
For you, it's Gujarati because, no one told you. It's very interesting what you're telling me because there is now in linguistics more and more this idea that, languages are constructs. When we name different languages, these are social constructs, really. And this is what has happened for you. In your lexicon, there's no separation between Swahili and Gujarati or between Swahili words and Gujarati words. Somehow they kept the Swahili with us. They moved here and they kept that part of their lives. They kept it with us and they shared it through language with you.
Mike Orbit was a newly qualified teacher in Leicester when we, Ugandan Asians, came to the UK. So what was it like teaching the new arrivals?
I'm not ashamed to admit I made the first and last mistake when I first walked into the classroom. So I saw all these brown faces, particularly the Indian children. And I said to the classroom teacher, what am I going to do with these children? What do you want me to do with them? I don't speak their languages. She said, Mike, go and speak to them. The majority of them speak English. The Asian children that came from East Africa with their parents as refugees, a lot of them have very good knowledge of English.
And what about the new arrivals themselves?
When they came to the UK, then they did not speak English just at school in a formal context. They spoke English also in informal context with friends. And the language or the languages that we speak in informal context is never the same as the one we speak in formal context. The words can be different, the sounds, the phonology, the grammar.
Haki Kapasi, who came with her family in 1972, when she was about 9 years old, remembers this all too well.
I mean, there were some things which obviously there was a huge culture shock. It's like, whoa, because we were taught English and we were taught grammatically. This is how these sentences are constructed. And to see the violation of the language was really confusing. Like, I'm sure it's not you was here. I'm sure it's you were here. And I was getting confused, So that was one thing. And everything was so different.
I was much younger than Haki, so don't remember our arrival and having to cope with the shock of it all. But I do remember trying to find my way and trying to fit in. The inside world behind closed doors was very different to the one outside. And for me, it became very important to be able to speak English well and without an accent so that I wouldn't get the mickey taken out of me or get bullied at school. So I would watch and listen to the news, not to hear what was being said, but how it was being said. And I would stand in front of a mirror and practice the way the words were being pronounced.
Language can be used, or different registers or styles or different varieties of a language can be used for group belonging or to express that we belong to a particular group. It can be used also to distance ourselves, from particular group. But the other side of what you're saying is that there's always attitudes towards languages or towards different varieties of a language. And some attitudes are good and some attitudes are negative.
For many Ugandans, Swahili is associated with brutal regimes of its former dictators like Idi Amin and the regime's ruthless soldiers who were trained in Swahili. But for many Ugandan Asians who came to the UK following the expulsion, it's one of their fondest memories that they hold on to even now. And that's how Manish Tobani remembers it, with warmth and affection.
Jambo, habari gani? Mzuri sana. Kuja hapa, nataka kula chakula, keti chini.
What does all that mean? I know Jambo.
Jambo, kuja hapa, come here, keti chini, sit down. Nataka kula chakula, you want to eat some food, Wewe ko mzuri sana, you're a very nice person, There's a lot of words, Asante sana, thank you very much. Some of it I've forgotten, but once I think about it, it comes in my mind. Then I speak. Even when I go to see my mom, I speak some Swahili words, My mom likes it.
Mira Trivedi, a former presenter on BBC Radio Leicester's 6 o'clock show, says it's great to be able to speak so many languages.
Here we don't speak Gujarati. They really clean, clear Gujarati, because we say table, chair, see you, okay. We use those words, trousers, top. I mean, we don't say patloon and school for nishal. We don't say. So it's force of habit of that country and that language, and which we've carried over here as well, and we've not forgotten. It is nice, I think.
It is something I like and value, the mix of languages I've inherited that are spoken in my family. Language provides a sense of nostalgia, a sense of journey, a sense of pride of who I am and where I'm from.
Culturally, I think it is very rich to have so many languages spoken within a family.
Exiled, a journey with me, Rupal Rajani. Stories of Ugandan Asians 50 years on.